Desmond Carter was 40 years old, and, until that Tuesday evening, he believed he had a steady, ordinary marriage. He was a bank auditor, careful with numbers, careful with people, married 17 years to Adrienne, a real estate developer whose ambition he'd always quietly admired. He'd never once felt threatened by how easily she commanded a room. That evening, Desmond made a decision that would unravel everything he thought he knew about trust, patience, and the woman he'd built a life with. He flew home a day early, told no one, and drove to the airport to surprise her at arrivals. He watched the terminal doors, watched her walk out laughing, hand in hand with another man, watched that man kiss her goodbye, like it was routine, like it had happened 100 times before. Adrienne never saw Desmond standing there. She scanned the pickup lane for her ride, completely unaware her husband was 20 feet away, completely unaware anything had just changed. What Desmond did next would cost her the business, the money, and every person who'd ever trusted her. But in that frozen moment by the terminal doors, all he did was watch and decide. Before we jump into the story, comment where in the world you are watching from and subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you need to hear. The hotel room smelled like recycled air and carpet cleaner. Desmond Carter sat on the edge of the stiff mattress, his laptop open on the nightstand. His jacket hung neatly over the back of the desk chair. His shoes were lined up at the foot of the bed, side by side, heels even. That was just how he was. The audit binder sat closed on the desk behind him. 3 days of work, ledgers, wire transfers, reconciliation reports, all organized, tabbed, and ready for the morning debrief. He'd finished 2 hours ahead of schedule. He always did. The laptop screen glowed. Kayla's face filled it. "Dad, you look tired," she said. "I'm fine." He smiled. "How's school?" "Boring." She pulled her knees to her chest, sitting cross-legged on her bed, back home in Charlotte. 16th birthday, 3 months ago. She still had the same gap-toothed smile she'd had at 6. Mr. Patterson gave us a 5-page paper on the Great Gatsby due Friday. 5 pages, Dad. That's not a lot. It is when you have practice Tuesday and Thursday. Then you start tonight. She groaned, but she was still smiling. "You sound like Mom." "Your mom is right about most things," he said. It came out easy, automatic. The kind of thing a man says after 17 years without even thinking. They talked for 20 minutes. He asked about practice, about her friend Simone, about whether she'd eaten something other than cereal for dinner. She told him the leftover pasta he'd made Sunday was gone, and that she'd had 2 bowls of it. He felt a quiet satisfaction in that. The kind a man feels when something small he did still matters 2 states away. After they hung up, he called Adrienne. She picked up on the 4th ring. "Hey." Her voice was clipped. Background noise behind her. A lobby, maybe. Heels on hard floors. "Hey yourself," he said. "Just finished the binder. Wanted to check in. I'm kind of in the middle of something." "I know. Just a minute." A pause. Then a small exhale, like she was stepping away from something. "Okay, what's up?" "How's Atlanta?" "Fine. Busy. The Hollowell project is moving faster than we expected." "That's good." He leaned back against the headboard. "Preston getting the permits sorted out?" Another pause. Shorter this time, but he noticed it. "Yeah, he's handling it." Preston Vance, her business partner at Adrienne Carter Development Group. 39 years old, licensed real estate agent, sharp dresser, the kind of man who laughed a half-second before everyone else, like he already knew the punchline. Desmond had met him at a company dinner 8 months ago. Preston had shaken his hand firmly and said, "Adrienne talks about you all the time," in a way that made it sound like a compliment, but didn't quite land as one. "I tried to reach you Tuesday," Desmond said. "And Wednesday morning." "Des, I told you this week was going to be crazy." "You did." He kept his voice even. "I just wanted to ask about the Hollowell numbers. Adrienne, The projected return you showed me last month was based on a 12% appreciation estimate. I ran it against the county comps, and I'm not sure that number holds. Can we not do this right now?" Her voice had an edge to it now. Not anger exactly. More like impatience. Like he was a meeting she'd double-booked. He was quiet for a moment. Somewhere in her background, a man's voice said something he couldn't make out, and Adrienne made a small sound in response. Not words, just a noise, like she was signaling she'd be right back. "I should go," she said. "Okay." He paused. "Your flight's still tomorrow at 6:40? "Yeah. I'll just grab a cab from the airport. Don't worry about it." "I wasn't going to," he said. But she'd already said goodbye. He sat with the dead call for a moment. The room was very quiet, unreachable most of the week, vague about the deal, irritated at a reasonable question. He had noticed each of those things the way he noticed discrepancies in a ledger. Not with alarm, not yet, but with the quiet attention of a man whose job was to find the thing that didn't add up. He thought about Kayla's college fund. $43,000. He'd built it himself. $100 at a time before the promotions, then more after. Adrienne co-managed it. She knew where every dollar in this family lived because he'd shown her. He closed the laptop. Outside his window, the Atlanta skyline glittered cold and indifferent against a black sky. He thought about Kayla's face on that screen, her gap-toothed smile, her empty pasta bowl. He thought about 17 years. Then he opened the airline app and rebooked his flight for 6:00 a.m. One connection. Home by noon. 2 full hours before Adrienne's plane touched down. Plenty of time to get to the airport and be standing there when she walked out. He didn't text Kayla. He didn't text Adrienne. He wanted it to be a real surprise. He set his alarm, closed his eyes, and let himself feel something close to excitement. Then he reached over, straightened the alarm clock so it faced him squarely, and went to sleep. The Charlotte Douglas arrivals lane was loud in the way airports always were. Rolling luggage, honking horns, a shuttle bus hissing its brakes every 30 seconds. Desmond pulled into the cell phone lot just after noon and cut the engine. Adrienne's flight had landed 8 minutes ago. He'd checked the app 3 times since parking. He sat with his hands in his lap and looked at the terminal entrance. Sliding glass doors, a steady stream of travelers coming through, pulling bags, squinting in the afternoon sun. He was early. He knew he was early. Deplaning took time. Baggage took time. He knew all of this and still found himself watching every face that came through those doors. He had flowers on the passenger seat. Nothing dramatic. A small bunch of yellow tulips he'd grabbed from a gas station off I-85. Adrienne liked yellow. He'd remembered that on the drive over, and it had made him feel good about himself in a simple, uncomplicated way. His phone was out. He'd already opened the camera, planning to catch her face the moment she spotted him. That first flash of surprise, then the smile. He wanted to save it. The doors slid open. A family with a stroller. 2 businessmen in dark suits. An older woman with a rolling cart. He checked the app again. Baggage claim 4. She always traveled carry-on only. She'd be out fast. His knee was bouncing. He noticed it and stopped. The doors opened again. Adrienne walked out. She looked the way she always looked after a business trip. Heels precise on the pavement, hair still perfect. The soft gray blazer she'd bought last spring fitted across her shoulders. Her carry-on rolled behind her, one hand on the handle, effortless. Desmond's hand tightened on his phone. He started to open the car door. Then he saw the other hand. Preston Vance walked through those same doors half a step behind her. His hand was holding hers, fingers laced. Not the accidental brush of 2 people walking close. Holding. The kind of holding that had been going on long enough to be comfortable. Desmond did not open the door. He sat completely still. Preston was laughing at something. He had a slim leather bag over one shoulder and his jacket was off, folded over his free arm, like a man who was completely at ease with where he was and who he was with. He leaned down and said something close to Adrienne's ear, and she tilted her head toward him the way a woman does when she's been listening to someone's voice for a long time and likes the sound of it. Then Preston stopped walking. He turned to face her, said something shorter this time. Adrienne smiled up at him. He kissed her. Not a long kiss, but not a quick one either. Right there on the curb, in the open afternoon light, with taxis idling and strangers passing 2 feet away. Then he let go of her hand, touched her jaw once, turned, and walked toward the short-term parking structure without looking back. Just like that. Like it was routine. Adrienne watched him go for a moment. Then she turned to face the pickup lane, one hand shading her eyes, scanning the rows of idling cars. She was looking for her cab. Or a rideshare. She reached into her blazer pocket and pulled out her phone. Desmond was 30 feet away. She looked right past his car without seeing him. Her eyes moved over the lane, the way a person looks through a window they don't know has someone standing behind it. He watched her pull up an app, watched her tap the screen, watched her tuck the phone back into her pocket, and stand there, waiting, rolling her carry-on handle back and forth once, twice, a small, restless habit he had seen 1,000 times. He knew every one of her habits. That thought sat in his chest like something heavy dropped from a height. He did not get out of the car. He did not honk. He did not call her name or her phone, or do any of the 1,000 things a man in his position might do in the first hot seconds of a moment like this. He put the car in reverse instead. He backed out of the cell phone lot slowly. He signaled. He merged onto the airport road. He drove the speed limit the entire way home. The house was quiet when he got there. He carried his bag inside, hung his jacket, took the yellow tulips from the passenger seat and set them face down in the trash can beneath the kitchen sink, under a paper towel so they wouldn't be the first thing anyone saw. Then he sat down at the kitchen table. His hands were flat on the wood surface, still. He looked at them for a long moment, the same hands that had straightened his shoes the night before, that had tabbed every page of that audit binder, that had just driven 35 minutes without turning on the radio. He didn't move until he heard the rideshare pull into the driveway. Then he got up, walked to the refrigerator, and poured himself a glass of water. By the time the front door opened, he was leaning against the counter, glass in hand, and his face was calm. Adrienne came through the front door with her carry-on wheels clicking against the hardwood and her voice already filling the room. "Baby!" She dropped the bag handle and crossed the kitchen in 3 steps, wrapping her arms around Desmond's waist from the side, pressing her cheek against his shoulder. She smelled like airport air and the perfume she always reapplied before landing. "I didn't expect you home yet. I thought your flight was tomorrow." They finished the review early. His voice was even. "Figured I'd head back." She pulled back and looked at him with a tired smile. "You should have told me. I would have had you pick me up." "Didn't want to make it a thing," he said. "How was the trip?" She exhaled like the question itself was heavy. "Fine. Exhausting." She was already moving toward the counter, setting down her phone, reaching for the cabinet where they kept the wine glasses. 3 days of back and forth with the investors, and I swear not one of them actually read the projections. She poured herself a glass and leaned against the counter across from him. "How was the audit?" "Clean," Desmond said. "Mostly?" She nodded in that half-listening way that meant she'd moved on inside her own head. She looked around the kitchen, noticed the pot on the stove. "You cooked?" "Pasta. There's extra." "God, you're good to me," she said. And she meant it the way people mean things they've stopped paying attention to. They ate at the kitchen table. Adrienne talked about the investors, about a permitting delay on a project in Rock Hill, about a dinner she'd attended where the food was terrible. She was animated the way she always was after a trip, the energy of being somewhere else still burning off. Desmond ate and asked questions at the right moments. He kept his fork moving. He did not look at her hands. After dinner, she showered while he cleaned up the plates. She reappeared in the living room in her robe with her hair wrapped in a towel, tucked herself against him on the couch, and watched 40 minutes of a home renovation show she liked. He sat there with his arm behind her. He could feel her breathing slow as she got drowsy. "Early meeting tomorrow?" he asked when the credits rolled. 9 o'clock. She yawned. "I need to crash." She was asleep within minutes of her head hitting the pillow. He lay there in the dark for another 30, listening to her breathe, watching the ceiling. Then he got up. His home office was the smallest room in the house. Just a desk, a filing cabinet, and a shelf of binders he'd accumulated over 15 years of audit work. He closed the door softly and sat down without turning on the overhead light. Just the desk lamp, angled low. He opened his laptop. He started with the joint checking account. He'd checked it 2 days ago from the hotel. Routine. Balances. Nothing unusual. But now he pulled up the full 6-month transaction history and let his auditor's eye run across the rows. Most of it was familiar. Mortgage on the 14th. Utilities. Kayla's school fees. Groceries. His own direct deposits, reliable as a clock. Then he saw it. Wire transfers. 4 of them, spread across 4 months. 12,000, 18,000, 9,000, 22,000. The amounts were irregular, which was itself a pattern he recognized. Irregular amounts were less likely to trigger automatic flags. The payee name on each one was the same. Vantage Bridge Properties, LLC. He didn't recognize it. He typed the name into a separate browser tab and ran a quick search. A bare-bones business registration page came back. Registered 8 months ago in South Carolina. One managing member listed. The name wasn't Adrian's, it was Preston Vance. Desmond sat with that for a moment. His face didn't change. He wrote the LLC name and the registration date on a notepad in small, even handwriting. Then he opened the shared cloud account. Adrian had added him to her family storage 2 years ago, so he could access Kayla's school records. He doubted she remembered it was still active. He navigated to her synced calendar, the one connected to her business email, and began scrolling back. Preston's name was everywhere, not in any way that would look unusual to a casual eye. PM, PV site walk, PV investor call, PV check-in, 3 p.m. But when Desmond laid those entries against the wire transfer dates and the hotel receipts he found buried in a shared folder labeled Business Travel Q3, a shape emerged. The kind of shape he spent his professional life learning to recognize. Gaps where there should be records. Overlap where there shouldn't be any. And underneath it all, money moving in a direction no one had told him about. He opened a new document and began building a timeline. He worked without hurry. He labeled each entry, cross-referenced each date, and noted every place the documentation went quiet. Because silence in a financial record wasn't the absence of information. It was information. 2 hours passed, maybe more. At some point, the clock on the desk read 4:47. He saved the document under a name that meant nothing, Q4 Review Notes, and closed the laptop. He sat in the low lamplight for a moment, hands still on the desk. She'll tell me everything. The thought was quiet and certain, the way a decision sounds once it's already been made, but only when I'm ready to hear it. He turned off the lamp and went to get a few hours of sleep. The week moved the way weeks do when you're pretending everything is fine. Monday, he made Kayla's lunch before she came downstairs. Tuesday, he sat through a budget review at the bank and flagged 2 discrepancies nobody else had caught. Wednesday, he and Adrian ate dinner together at the kitchen table, and she told him about a zoning meeting, and he listened and passed her the bread. He smiled at the right times, he asked the right questions, and every night, after the house went quiet, he worked. The LLC was the thread. He pulled it. He started with the public records. South Carolina business filings, available to anyone with a browser and patience. Vantage Bridge Properties LLC had been registered 8 months ago, with Preston Vance listed as the sole managing member. But Desmond had spent 15 years following money, and he knew that the person whose name was on the front of a thing wasn't always the person running it. He went deeper. Through the bank's professional database, the same system he used for due diligence on commercial loan applications, he ran a search on Vantage Bridge's business activity. What came back was thin on the surface, but dense underneath if you knew how to read it. 2 commercial accounts, a registered address that matched a mail forwarding service in Colombia, and a secondary signatory on the operating account that wasn't Preston's name. It was Adrian's, not Adrienne Carter. The name on file was A.M. Carter, her middle initial. The name she used for her LLC registrations, the same name on their joint tax returns buried in the shared cloud folder. He wrote it down. She wasn't a managing member. She wasn't listed anywhere in the public filing, but her signature was on the bank account. She was the money. Preston was the face. It was a clean structure, actually. He could appreciate the architecture of it the way you appreciate a lock that almost held. The condo took him 2 nights to find. He traced it through property tax records, public, searchable, boring to most people, a map to him. A unit in a new mid-rise in Charlotte's South End neighborhood, purchased 11 months ago. Listed owner, Preston A. Vance. Purchase price, $387,000. He pulled the closing documents through a county records portal. The down payment, $62,000, had been wired from a business account. He cross-referenced the account routing number against Vantage Bridge's registration paperwork. It matched. So Preston hadn't just bought a place. Adrian had funded it, through the LLC, with investor money that was supposed to be going into a development project with her name on the letterhead. He sat back in his chair. He thought about the home renovation show they'd watched together on the couch, Adrienne tucked under his arm, her breathing going slow. He thought about how natural it had felt, how completely ordinary. He picked up his pen and kept writing. The appraisal documents were the last thing he found that week, and they were the piece that changed the weight of everything. He'd been reviewing the project financials, a mixed-use development in Rock Hill that Adrian had talked about for months at dinner, when he noticed the property valuations were high. Not outrageously high. High in the careful, deliberate way that someone with experience would do it. Just enough to make the numbers work for the investors. Just enough to justify the capital they'd raised. He pulled the appraisal reports directly. Each one had a signature block at the bottom, a licensed appraiser on record, a name he didn't recognize, but co-signed beneath, with a license number and a notary stamp. Preston Vance. License SCRE 041872. He stared at that number for a long moment. Preston wasn't just Adrian's partner in the romantic sense. He wasn't just the face on the LLC. He was the one giving the fraud its paperwork legs. His real estate license, his notary credentials, his professional signature, all of it stamped onto documents that said the numbers were real when they weren't. Without his co-sign, the appraisals didn't hold. The investors didn't fund the project. The shell company didn't get its money. Preston wasn't a passenger in this. He was load-bearing. Desmond thought about the way Preston had kissed Adrian at the airport, easy and unhurried, like a man who believed he'd already won something. He wrote down the license number. He noted the date on each appraisal. He cross-referenced each one against the investor funding timeline he'd been building. Every piece fit. He worked until 1 a.m., then started backing everything up. He copied each document, screenshots, downloaded PDFs, the timeline he'd built, onto a small external drive he'd bought with cash at a drugstore on his lunch break. Nothing on the shared cloud. Nothing on a device connected to their home network. The drive was his alone, and when it was full, he held it in his palm for a moment. Small and solid, and worth more than anything in the house. He locked it in the fireproof box in his office closet, behind the binders from 2019. He was reaching to close the laptop when Kayla's voice floated up from the bottom of the stairs. "Dad." A pause. "Dinner's ready. Mom made that rice you like." The email came on a Tuesday. Desmond was at his desk at the bank, halfway through a cup of coffee that had gone cold, when his phone buzzed with a notification he almost scrolled past. College Path Savings Group. Important account activity. He tapped it. "Dear account holder, this message confirms your recent withdrawal request has been processed. Please log in to review the transaction details. If you did not authorize this withdrawal, contact us immediately." He read it twice. Then he set the coffee down and read it a third time. He hadn't authorized anything. He hadn't logged into that account in 2 months, and the last time he did it was just to check the balance and feel good about the number sitting there. $41,000. 4 years of steady deposits. Every birthday check from Odessa. Every bonus he'd held back from himself. Every small sacrifice folded quietly into that account. Kayla's future. The thing he was most proud of that nobody ever saw. He put in his earbuds and called the number on the email before he even closed his office door all the way. The customer service rep was polite and efficient. She confirmed his identity, pulled up the account, and went quiet for just a moment. The kind of quiet that meant she was reading something she wasn't sure how to say. "Mr. Carter, a withdrawal of $22,000 was processed 11 days ago. The request was submitted by mail with a signed authorization form." Desmond kept his voice level. "I need you to read me the name on that form." The account holder's signature is listed as Desmond A. Carter. Another pause. "And there's a notarization seal on the form. It appears to have been witnessed and stamped by a licensed notary." He pressed the phone closer to his ear. "I need a copy of that document," he said. "Every page. Faxed to my direct line or emailed securely. Today, if possible. Of course, I'll flag it as urgent." He gave her his work email, thanked her, and hung up. Then he sat completely still for almost a full minute. $22,000. Gone. He thought about the night he'd opened that account. Kayla had been 3 weeks old. He'd sat at this same kind of desk, different city, smaller office, and filled out the forms by hand because he wanted to feel the weight of it. He wanted it to mean something. He picked up his pen. He did not throw it. He set it flat on the desk and waited for the email. It arrived 40 minutes later. He opened the attachment and enlarged the scanned document on his monitor. The signature on the authorization form looked like his. The loops were right. The way the D opened up, the way the C in Carter pulled slightly left. It was practiced. Someone had spent time on it. But Desmond had been signing his name for 40 years, and he knew how his hand moved. The pressure was wrong. The spacing between letters was slightly too even, like someone copying from a sample rather than writing from muscle memory. He would have caught it in 20 seconds on a standard audit. His eyes moved to the bottom of the page. The notarization block. Witnessed and certified by Preston A. Vance, Notary Public, Commission, DARI-NC-NP 7734, License, SCRE 041872, the same license number he'd written in his notes 6 nights ago. He read it again, slowly. The way you read something when you want to be absolutely certain before you let yourself feel what you're feeling. Preston had notarized the forgery. He'd used his own credentials, his real estate license, his notary commission, to make a stolen signature look legal, to take money that belonged to a 16-year-old girl and funnel it into the shell company shortfall that he and Adrian had created together. Kayla hadn't done anything. She didn't know any of this existed. She was upstairs, somewhere in her own life, thinking about college applications and her friends, trusting that the ground under her feet was solid, because her father had made it solid, and they had reached down through it and taken from her without blinking. Desmond felt something move through him that wasn't quite anger. It was colder than that, steadier. The kind of feeling that doesn't push you to your feet. It roots you to your chair and makes your thinking sharper and your hands very still. He was not going to call Adrian. He was not going to confront Preston. He was not going to do anything tonight that felt good and cost him everything he'd built over the past 2 weeks. He was going to treat this exactly the way he treated every case of financial fraud that crossed his desk at the bank. Document, verify, build. He saved the scanned form to a secure folder on his work drive, then transferred a copy to a flash drive that went directly into his jacket pocket. Tonight, it would join the external drive in the fireproof box. He pulled out his personal phone and scrolled to Wendell Cross in his contacts. His cousin answered on the second ring. "Des, what's up?" "I need to meet with you this weekend," Desmond said. "Privately." "Not a family thing. More like a client thing." A brief silence. "How serious?" "Serious enough that I'm calling you instead of waiting." "Saturday morning," Wendell said. "My office, 8 o'clock. I'll be there." Wendell Cross kept his office modest on purpose. That was what he always said. A fancy office makes clients think you're spending their money. The room was clean and organized, with a single window that faced a parking lot, a row of matching gray binders on the shelf behind his desk, and 2 chairs across from each other that were comfortable but not luxurious. It smelled like coffee and old paper. It felt like a place where serious things got handled seriously. Desmond had always liked that about it. He arrived at 7:58, and Wendell was already there, 2 cups of coffee on the desk, reading glasses pushed up on his forehead, the way he always wore them when he wasn't actively using them. He was a big man, broad through the shoulders, with close-cut gray at his temples, and the kind of face that didn't give away much. He'd been practicing real estate law for 18 years and had seen most things twice. "Retirement planning," Wendell said, as Desmond sat down. He said it the way a man says something when he already knows it isn't true. "That's what I told my wife," Desmond said. Wendell picked up his coffee. "You told Adrian you were coming to see me?" "I told her I was meeting a friend for breakfast." Wendell nodded once, slowly, reading that. He didn't push. He just waited, the way good attorneys do, letting the other person fill the silence at their own pace. Desmond reached into his jacket and set a manila folder on the desk. "I need you to look at these and tell me what you see." Wendell didn't speak much while he read. That was another thing Desmond trusted about him. He didn't perform his reactions. He turned pages steadily, glasses down now, leaning slightly forward with his elbows on the desk. His expression stayed flat and professional, but once, near the middle of the stack, when he reached the inflated appraisal documents, he stopped and went back 1 page. Then forward again. Then back. "These appraisal numbers," Wendell said. "I know. This property on Caldwell Lane is listed at 680. He tapped the page. "The comps in that corridor don't support anything above 450. Not in the last 3 years. Not even close." "The LLC used those numbers to raise investor capital," Desmond said. "The gap between the real value and the inflated value is where the money comes from." Wendell looked up. "And this license number on the appraisal cosign. Preston Vance, her business partner." Desmond paused. "And more than that?" Wendell held his gaze for a moment. Then he set the appraisal down and picked up the last document in the stack, the withdrawal form from Kayla's college fund. He read it slowly. When he reached the notarization block at the bottom, he took his glasses off entirely and set them on the desk. He notarized a forged signature, Wendell said. It wasn't a question. His commission number, his real estate license, his stamp. Wendell was quiet for a long moment. Outside, a car pulled into the lot and parked, and the engine cut off, and everything went still again. "Des," Wendell said, "this isn't just a personal matter." "I know what it is. I need you to hear me say it out loud." Wendell folded his hands on the desk. "The shell company and the falsified appraisals, that's real estate fraud. That draws the State Real Estate Commission, potentially the AG's office, and depending on how the investor funds were transferred, possibly federal wire fraud statute. He let that land. But Preston's notarization on this withdrawal form, that is a separate offense entirely. Notarizing a document you know contains a forged signature is a felony in this state. He could lose his license on that charge alone, completely independent of whatever happens with Adrian or the LLC. Desmond had known this. He had suspected it since the night he'd first seen the license number on the form. But hearing it spoken by a real estate attorney in a quiet office on a Saturday morning made it different, more solid, more real. "What do I need to do?" Desmond said. "You keep doing exactly what you've been doing." Wendell tapped the folder. "Documenting, preserving, not tipping your hand." He leaned back in his chair. "I'm going to start drafting an emergency motion to freeze the joint accounts. Yours and Adrienne's. When you're ready to move, we file it, and she can't touch anything. I'll also draft the fraud complaint for the commission with Preston named specifically." He looked at Desmond steadily. "But we don't move until the case is airtight. Not one day before." "Agreed," Desmond said. "Both of them need to believe nothing is wrong. The second one of them gets nervous and starts moving money or shredding documents, we lose leverage." "They won't suspect anything," Desmond said. "Adrienne thinks I don't look closely." Something shifted in Wendell's expression. Not pity. Wendell wasn't built for pity. It was closer to quiet recognition. The kind one careful man offers another. "I'll need a few more days to get the paperwork drafted properly," he said. "Maybe 4, maybe 5. Desmond nodded and picked up his coffee. 4 or 5 more days of normal dinners. 4 or 5 more evenings of watching Adrienne move through their house like everything was fine. 4 or 5 more mornings of greeting her across the kitchen counter with a steady face and nothing showing. He drove home already running the math on how long he could keep it up. Odessa Carter lived in the same house she'd raised Desmond in. A small brick ranch on Elmore Street with white shutters and a porch swing that creaked in the wind, and a garden out front that she kept immaculate from April to October. The neighborhood had changed over the years, but the house hadn't. Same kitchen with the yellow curtains, same smell of cedar, and something always simmering on the stove. Same framed scripture above the front door. "Trust in the Lord with all your heart," that Desmond had walked under 10,000 times. He pulled into her driveway just after noon. He hadn't told her much on the phone, just that he wanted to take her to lunch. She'd said, "Well, it's about time," and told him to pick her up at 12:30. He was early, which meant she was already standing at the door in her good coat when he came up the walk. "You look tired," she said, before he could even say hello. "I'm fine, Mama." She studied his face, the way only mothers can, like she was reading something written too small for anyone else to see. Then she patted his arm and let it go. They went to the diner on Westfield, the one they'd been going to since Desmond was a boy. Corner booth, laminated menus neither of them needed, a waitress named Gloria, who knew Odessa's order by heart. It felt safe, ordinary. Desmond had chosen it on purpose. They talked about Kayla first, her grades, a school trip she'd mentioned, how fast she was growing up. Odessa beamed at every detail. Then they talked about Desmond's job, the audit he'd finished, his work travel. He kept his tone easy and unhurried, the way he kept everything now, patient. He was working up to asking about Adrienne when Odessa put her fork down and looked at him. "Can I tell you something that's been sitting on me?" she said. Desmond set his water glass down. "Of course." She folded her hands on the table, the way she did in church when she was preparing to say something she'd already prayed over. "About 4 months ago," she said, "Adrienne came to see me, alone. She said she needed to talk to me about you." She paused. "She told me you were struggling, financially. Said you'd taken on too much with the mortgage and Kayla's fund and that you were too proud to say so." Odessa looked down at her hands briefly. "She said she didn't want you to know she'd come to me, that it would embarrass you." Desmond said nothing. He kept his face still. She asked me for a loan, Odessa said, to help cover what she called a temporary shortfall. She said she'd handle it herself and pay me back before you ever knew. She made it sound like she was protecting you. Her voice had gone quiet. So I gave it to her. $40,000, Desmond, out of my retirement account. The number landed in his chest like something heavy dropped from a height. $40,000. His mother's retirement savings, handed over in good faith to the woman who had sat across from him at dinner every night and never said a word. "Mama," he said. "I know." Her eyes were steady, but her jaw was tight. "I should have called you first, but she made it seem like calling you would only make things worse. I thought I was helping my son." She shook her head slowly. "I felt so good about it. That whole drive home, I thought, this is what family does." "She didn't come alone," Desmond said carefully. Odessa looked at him. "No. Preston Vance drove her. He waited outside in the car the whole time." She said it plainly, like she'd already turned the detail over many times and couldn't figure out what to do with it. "I thought it was strange, but she said her car was in the shop. I didn't think—" She stopped. "Why was he there, Desmond?" He was quiet for a moment. The diner hummed around them, glasses clinking, a short-order cook calling something out from the kitchen, Gloria refilling coffee 2 tables down. He wasn't just her business partner, Desmond said. It didn't take long. He didn't say everything. He wasn't ready to say everything yet. But he said enough. Odessa listened without interrupting, which wasn't like her. She sat very still. When he finished, she looked out the window for a long moment at the parking lot and the gray afternoon beyond it. Then she said, "I have the paper she signed, the loan agreement. I made her sign it because your father always said, put everything in writing." Her voice was steady, but the grief in it was unmistakable. "It has her signature, and the date, and the amount." "I need that document," Desmond said. "I'll get it for you today." She did. They drove back to the house on Elmore Street, and she went straight to the filing cabinet in the hallway, the old green metal one that had been there since the 80s, and pulled a folder without hesitating. She handed him the document without ceremony. No drama, just a mother placing something important into her son's hands. Desmond looked at Adrienne's signature at the bottom. Clean, confident, like she'd had no doubt at all. He slid it into the folder beside everything else. "It'll all be addressed very soon," he told Odessa. "I can't explain all of it yet, but I need you to trust me and stay quiet a little while longer." Odessa looked at him for a long moment. Then she nodded once. "I raised you to finish what you start," she said. "So finish it." The announcement came on a Tuesday morning. Desmond was standing at the kitchen counter pouring coffee when Adrienne came downstairs, already dressed, already bright-eyed, her phone in her hand like she'd been awake for an hour. "We're closing the Meridian deal Friday," she said. "I want to do a dinner, here, for the investors." She set her phone face down on the counter and reached past him for a mug, close enough that her shoulder brushed his. He didn't flinch. "How many people?" he said. "Maybe 12. Preston's bringing a few of his clients. They've been in on the project from the start. I want to celebrate properly. Good food, good wine, the whole thing." She said Preston's name the way she always did now. Easy, unguarded, like it was just a word. Desmond took a sip of his coffee. "That sounds great," he said. "Let me help you plan it." She looked at him, maybe half a second longer than usual. Then she smiled. "Really? You work hard," he said. "You deserve a real celebration." She squeezed his arm and reached for her phone again, already moving on to the next thing, already inside her own world. He watched her go and let the quiet settle back around him. He called Wendell that afternoon from the parking garage at work, sitting in his car with the engine off. "Friday night," he said. Wendell didn't hesitate. "I'll be ready." They'd already laid out the structure in careful pieces over the past week. Desmond bringing documents, Wendell reviewing each one, drafting the legal filings in a sequence designed to land without warning. Now they ran through the timing one final time. The fraud complaint to the State Real Estate Commission, naming both Adrienne Carter and Preston Vance, would be filed Thursday afternoon. Wendell had already prepared the emergency motion to freeze the joint accounts and the shell company's financial activity. That would be submitted Thursday evening. By Friday morning, the regulatory complaint against Preston's notarization fraud, a separate filing that targeted his license specifically, would be on record with the Commission. All of it quiet. All of it moving through official channels before a single guest walked through Desmond's front door. Preston's bringing investors to that dinner, Desmond said. His own clients. I know, Wendell said. Which means his people will hear what he did from the same room he's sitting in. Desmond said nothing for a moment. Outside the garage, a car moved through the structure slowly, headlights sweeping the concrete wall. You doing okay? Wendell asked. I'm fine. That's not what I asked. Desmond exhaled through his nose. I'm ready. That's what I am. Thursday evening, after Adrienne left to run errands, he spread everything across his home office desk. The shell company formation documents, bank transfer records going back 8 months, the inflated appraisal forms bearing Preston's license number and signature, the forged college fund withdrawal notarized in Preston's hand, Odessa's signed loan agreement, Adrienne's signature clean and bold at the bottom, screenshots of calendar entries backed up to the private drive. 6 months of a marriage quietly opened up and examined under a light Adrienne never thought he'd turn on. He organized them into a sequence, not by emotion, but by logic, the way a case is built. First the company, then the money, then the forgery, then the family, each document leading to the next like steps down a staircase. He printed 2 full sets, one for the room, one for Wendell, who confirmed by text that all 3 filings had gone through. Commission received both complaints. Account freeze motion filed. We're locked in. Desmond read the message twice. Then he set his phone face down and sat with that for a moment. Kayla's college fund, his mother's retirement savings, 17 years of a life built on the assumption that the person sleeping beside him was building it too. He didn't let himself stay in that feeling. He'd gotten good at stepping back from the edge of it, feeling it just enough to know it was real, then putting it somewhere useful. He stacked the documents into a folder and slid it into the top drawer of his desk. Then he wrote out, by hand, what he intended to say. Not a speech, not a performance, just the facts in order, said plainly. He wrote it once, read it back, crossed out 2 sentences that felt like anger instead of precision, rewrote them cleaner. He practiced it quietly, alone in the room, standing at the window with the lights off, and the neighborhood settling into evening outside. His voice stayed level. That was the point. The documents would carry the weight. His voice just had to stay out of the way. By 7 o'clock Friday evening, the house smelled like roasted garlic and warm bread, and Adrienne was laughing in the kitchen with a glass of wine already in her hand. Desmond stood at the front door in a pressed shirt, greeting each guest as they arrived. He shook hands, smiled, took coats. Preston walked in at 7:15 with 2 couples behind him, smooth and easy, working the foyer like he'd already won something. Desmond, he said, extending his hand, good of you to open your home for this. Of course, Desmond said. He shook the man's hand firmly. We're glad you're all here. He meant it. He truly did. The folder sat in his office drawer, waiting. The toast came at 8:15. Adrienne stood at the head of the table, her wine glass lifted, her smile wide and warm and practiced. She'd changed into a black dress before dinner. Her hair was pinned up. She looked exactly the way she always wanted to look, like someone who had arrived. To Meridian, she said, and to every person in this room who believed in it. Glasses rose around the table. 12 people, maybe 13, with Odessa, who sat near Desmond's end and hadn't touched her wine. Her hands were folded in her lap. Her jaw was set. Preston raised his glass across the table and caught Adrienne's eye with a small, private smile, the kind men wear when they believe they've already gotten away with something. Desmond let the toast settle. He let the glasses come down and the murmur of conversation start back up, and the room feel, for just one more moment, like what Adrienne had designed it to be. Then he stood up. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "I'm sorry to interrupt," he said. "I'd like to share a few things with everyone before we go any further." The table went quiet. Adrienne turned to look at him with a small, uncertain laugh. "Desmond!" "It won't take long," he said. He walked to the hallway and came back with the folder. He set it on the table without hurry and opened it. 8 months ago, he said, a limited liability company was formed under the name Vance Carter Development Group, LLC. It was registered using a business address connected to the Meridian Project. He slid the formation documents across to the nearest investor. "The money some of you put into this project, money you believed was going toward construction and development, was being redirected through that LLC into a separate account. That account funded, among other things, a privately purchased condo under Preston Vance's name." The room was very still. Desmond kept going. He moved through it the way he'd practiced, measured, one document leading to the next. 6 weeks ago, a withdrawal was made from my daughter's college fund. He held up the form so the table could see it. "My signature on this withdrawal request is forged." The document was notarized by Preston Vance, using his real estate agent credentials to make it appear legitimate. He set the copy down and slid duplicates along the table in both directions. "I have copies for everyone." Paper moved through the room like a current. Hands reached for it. Eyes dropped to read. "There is also the matter of my mother." Desmond looked down the table toward Odessa, who met his gaze and gave a small, quiet nod. "Adrienne approached her months ago and told her I was in financial trouble. She borrowed a significant portion of my mother's retirement savings using that story." Preston drove Adrienne to that meeting. He waited outside. He placed Odessa's signed loan document on the table. "My mother's signature. Adrienne's signature. Dated." Preston set down his fork. "Now hold on," he said. His voice was still smooth, still working. "I think what you're seeing here is a situation where I was not fully informed about how the company finances were being handled. Adrienne managed the books. I was focused on the properties. Preston." Desmond said the name simply, the way you'd say the name of a number that didn't add up. He pulled a single sheet from the folder and held it up. "This is the notarized appraisal form for the Meridian Project's secondary parcel. The appraisal value on this document is inflated by 40%. The notarization is yours." He set it on the table. "Your license number, your signature, your stamp." He slid another one forward. "This one, too." Preston's jaw tightened. A woman at the far end of the table, one of Preston's clients, a real estate investor named Gloria Marsh, who had attended these dinners before, who had recommended 2 of her own associates put money into the project, set her copy of the documents face down on the table. She said, "I'm pulling every dollar I have in this project, and I'm reporting you to the commission myself, tonight, as soon as I leave this table." No one at that end of the table argued with her. Adrienne's chair scraped back. She was already reaching for her phone, already stepping away from the table. Desmond heard her talking in a low, fast voice near the kitchen, the bank's customer service line. He knew that because he knew what she would hear. She came back to the doorway of the dining room with her phone against her chest. Her face had changed. The polish was gone. Under it was something younger and smaller, and suddenly very frightened. "The account is frozen," she said. She looked at Desmond. "What did you do?" He looked back at her calmly. What I should have done the moment I knew. Odessa pushed her chair back and stood. She crossed the room slowly and came to stand beside her son. She didn't say a word to Adrienne. She didn't need to. The distance between them said everything. The table erupted. Two investors spoke at once, wanting to know how much was gone. Preston was already shaking his head, already moving his hands, already building a wall between himself and the documents that bore his name. Adrienne turned to him with something sharp in her eyes, because she had expected him to hold the line, and she could see now that he wasn't going to. The investigators came on a Tuesday. Desmond was at work when Wendell called to tell him. Two state examiners had shown up at Adrienne's office with a formal notice of inquiry. Her real estate license was suspended the same afternoon, pending the outcome of the investigation, which Wendell said could take 6 months or more to resolve. Preston's suspension came the next morning. His was worse. The notarization fraud was its own charge, separate from the shell company scheme, and Wendell had made sure the State Commission understood that distinction clearly. Falsifying a notarized document using a professional license wasn't just a civil matter. It was a felony. Preston had signed his name and pressed his stamp on documents he knew were fraudulent, and he had done it more than once. The commission didn't have the discretion to look the other way. Desmond didn't celebrate. He just kept working. The next few weeks moved in a particular rhythm. Documents filed. Responses filed back. Depositions scheduled. Wendell walked Desmond through each step with the same quiet precision Desmond had used to build the case in the first place. And Desmond understood most of it, without needing much explanation. He already thought like this. He always had. The civil suits against Preston came fast. Gloria Marsh filed first, within 10 days of the dinner. 2 of her associates followed. Then a 4th investor, who had never attended a single dinner, but whose money had been quietly folded into the Meridian project through Preston's referrals. That man had no idea his funds had been routed through a shell LLC until Wendell's filing put his name on the list of affected parties. Preston tried, at first, to maintain the appearance of composure. He was seen at a coffee shop near his old office twice in the first week. He wore a blazer. He took calls. He was doing the thing that image-driven men do when the image starts to crack, pressing harder on the surface, hoping no one looks underneath. But the community he had built his reputation in was small. Word moved through it the way water moves through dry ground, fast and thorough. The church he attended, the same one where he had shaken hands with half his client list over the years, stopped being a place he could walk into without a conversation he didn't want to have. 2 former clients saw him in a parking lot one afternoon and turned the other way. The plea deal came in the 11th week. Preston surrendered his license permanently and accepted a restitution agreement that would take years to satisfy. The felony charge was reduced, but not eliminated. He avoided jail by a margin that was smaller than his attorney let him believe it was. Adrienne's properties were ordered liquidated to fund the court-mandated restitution. She had 4. The showcase condo downtown she had used in her marketing materials, a mixed-use property in the development corridor she had been most proud of, 2 smaller residential units she had purchased in the early years of the company and rarely mentioned anymore. They all sold. The market was decent. The numbers were enough. Kayla's college fund was restored first, in full, with interest accounted for. Desmond watched the confirmation appear in the fund provider's portal on a Wednesday afternoon, and sat with it for a moment, before closing the window. Odessa's retirement savings were returned the following week. Desmond drove to his mother's house that evening and told her in person. She sat in her kitchen chair and pressed both hands flat on the table and looked at the ceiling for a long moment without saying anything. "I knew," she finally said. "I knew you would make it right." He didn't say much back. He just stayed for dinner. The custody arrangement was finalized before the liquidation completed. Primary residence with Desmond. Kayla had told the mediator herself that she wanted to stay in the house, in her school, with her father. She hadn't been theatrical about it. She had been calm and direct, the way Desmond had always hoped to raise her. He got the house. Adrian signed the paperwork without a fight. By then, she didn't have the energy for one. 1 year passed. Desmond was promoted to lead auditor in the spring. The bank's regional director cited his attention to detail, his composure under pressure, and his record of identifying irregularities that others missed. The team he was assigned to manage was bigger than his last one. The work suited him exactly. He rebuilt Kayla's college fund beyond its original number. He did it carefully, over months, through patient contributions and better allocated investments he'd been meaning to restructure for years. By the time Kayla submitted her first application, the balance had grown past anything the shell company had taken. She was thriving, eager in the way only someone standing at the edge of something new can be. He and Odessa talked most Sunday evenings. Sometimes he drove over. She always cooked too much. On a quiet night in late October, Desmond sat at his home office desk and closed the ledger he had been working through. The room was still. The desk lamp threw a warm circle across the surface, catching the edge of the folder he had long since filed away, the one that had started everything. He set his pen down. He thought about what had been taken. He thought about what had been returned. Then he thought about what he had built since, and that was the part that stayed with him. Adrienne was renting a small apartment across town and working a leasing position at a property management company that had nothing to do with development. She worked the front desk. She answered phones. Preston was somewhere outside the industry entirely. The community that had once shaken his hand at Sunday service didn't call him anymore. Desmond turned off the desk lamp and sat for a moment in the quiet dark of a home that was his. Then he got up and went to check on his daughter. I hope you enjoyed that one. Be sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I've picked out 2 more for you that I think you'll really like.